Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and I'm with Just the Facts. I have to say, it certainly is a beautiful day in Duluth, all this warm weather. I have Donna Bergstrom, who is running for the Senate District in the upcoming election. And so, Donna, welcome to Just the Facts.
Yes.
And we're going to start out by having Donna tell our viewers a little bit about herself. She's got quite a interesting background, and so I'm going to just ask you, Donna, tell me about yourself, your accomplishments, your family, and then we'll talk about your race.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me on here, Marcy. And again, my name is Donna Bergstrom. I am a person that grew up here in this area, Carlton, Minnesota. And I am happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Carlton with a family of 7 kids, and my mom and dad were big supporters of our country and really instilled in us valueship for our country and our citizenship, and really raised us to be good citizens. And I took that with me throughout my life. My mom was raised on the Red Lake Reservation. She's an enrolled member of the Red Lake Nation, as am I, as are my siblings. My dad was raised in Bemidji, and that is where they met, up in that area. And they had instilled in us also a real strong value of family and community, and that is something that I value and cherish to this day. I did then graduate from Carlton, and I went on to the University of Minnesota, where I got a degree in political science. And after I graduated from there, I did spend some time backpacking around Europe just to get a flavor of what the world has to offer. And it was an opportunity for me to do so before, you had a lot of commitments and strings attached to you. So when I came back from there, it did occur to me that I am very much interested in being a good citizen and giving back to our country. I found a lot of value in our public education system, a lot of value in our college system, our state college systems, and I felt like I was a recipient of many wonderful things. So when I came back here after backpacking, I did work for a little bit in the private sector, and then it occurred to me that really what my interest was in defending a nation. So I did go down to the Navy after kind of looking into both the Navy and the Marine Corps, and I went down to the Navy and I asked them if I could join, and he said, well, actually, we're not enrolling candidates until next spring, but the Marine Corps is taking in for their fall class, and of course I was ready to go and had my sleeves rolled up, and I said, well, I'll go talk to them, and of course then Captain Grasmick gave a good story and made a nice pitch for me to join the Marine Corps, and I did, and it was something that I think was a good choice. I really enjoyed my time in the Marine Corps. Many people know that are familiar with my story that I was in the Marine Corps for 21 years. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in Quantico, Virginia. That's where the officers' school is. And then from there, we go straight on to the basic school, which is unique to the Marine Corps in that they put all their officers through one training program based on your class. And so through the basic school, we gain our career specialty or our occupational specialty. And in my case, I was selected, and I selected, I'd like to think it was mutual, to be a signals intelligence electronic warfare officer. And from there, you spend a good amount of time training. About a year of training goes into that before you actually go to your command. And from there, once I received all my training was complete, I did report to my first duty station, which was 1st Radio Battalion, Fleet Marine Force Pacific in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. So I was able to spend about 3 years in Hawaii on my first duty. And that was a very valuable experience. That was a tactical unit, and we supported our Fleet Marine forces that were deployed out, to the Far East and in that region. from there, I also had an opportunity to deploy to Japan. So I had a 6-month assignment as an officer in charge, which was my first taste of really leading Marines, and how important it is really to lead from the front and to not ask of anybody else anything that you wouldn't be willing to do. So that, I think, was a good learning ground for me to gain a sense of pride in our country and to show leadership from the front, which is something I hold firmly to this day. So, and then once I completed that, I had a command in Goleta Island, Panama. I was able to be the commanding officer of our unit in Goleta Island. And again, this was an opportunity to show leadership from the front. Our forces down there were drawing down at the time. So as I had a Marine transfer out, we didn't get a replacement. So we really had to do a lot of the same work with less and less people. And that was quite a challenge. And again, that was something that I learned how to streamline and make things more efficient, and also just rely on folks as part of their willingness to serve is part of building them up and telling them what a good job they're doing, and then also letting them know how valuable they are to the mission. And I think that really brings people in when they know they're part of the mission and willing to serve in ways that they hadn't been asked to before. And once I finished with my command, I was transferred back up to Washington, D.C., where I was able to release from active duty and spend some time in the reserves before I got recalled for OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I was not sent overseas, but instead I was stationed at our headquarters unit where we, as you know, everything about a unit still has to keep going on, even though you have forces deployed. So you still have to do promotions, and you have to do policy making, and you have to, give presentations to the Hill, and keep the budgets running, and all that stuff still has to keep going. So I was involved with our headquarters unit and was with our signals intelligence department, where we were still writing policy, and as well as getting our forces ready to deploy and meeting the needs of our forces that were deployed forward. So that was a very interesting time. I was on what they called stopgap. So that meant that you could not leave the service until there was legislation that said, we're going to lift the ban. So I did stay, and I had a good tour there at headquarters. It was a time when, you had to really be thoughtful in what you were doing because you were sending your forces into harm's way. You didn't ever want to short circuit anything. You wanted to really make sure that you had the best information possible and that you were really sending folks forward in the best way possible. And that's another lesson that I really learned during that time, is that it is important to hear divergent opinions, and it's important to have a different perspective brought to the table, because one of the things you don't want to do is send your forces into harm's way without knowing exactly what all is happening on the ground. And you don't want to have a table filled with folks who are telling you just the good story. This is going to work well, it's going to be really good. You really want to have people there telling you where you're going to fail, where this policy isn't going to work, and where your shortcomings are. So that is, again, something that I take to heart to this day, and I really believe that I like to hear different opinions, and I enjoy listening to other people's ideas. And trying to incorporate them all together. So, again, that's one of the most important things I think I learned in the Marine Corps, is how to incorporate other people's opinions and really value how things can be taken and blended together to really come up with a better plan, maybe than the one that I had, just by listening to other people. So that brought us probably up to this point. And in 2010, my family and I moved back here to Minnesota, and my husband is Skip Fisher, and he spent 20 years on Capitol Hill as a civil servant. He worked for many different parts of the Capitol Hill process on the Senate side and the House side. And our son Ari, who is, he just turned 11, so he's a lot of fun. And we moved back here, quite frankly, to be closer to my family. and to also raise our son in a way that I thought was going to be a little bit calmer, a little bit more reflectful of our values that I was raised with, as opposed to our lifestyle out in Silver Spring, Maryland. So we came back here and have been enjoying being back here. It's such a beautiful place, and as you mentioned earlier, the weather's been wonderful.
Amazingly so, isn't it?
Amazingly so. We got real lucky with that so far. And just really kind of jumped in with family things and jumped in with community. I was able to serve on the Duluth Indigenous Commission for a period of time. I remember coming here and hearing of the Duluth American Indian Commission, and I went to one of their forums, and that was an opportunity for me to meet some of the community members, and just thought it was an interesting part of our city that we would have a commission dedicated to American Indian interests. And so I did serve on that, and also worked for the CARE Clinic, the Center for American Indian Resources, which is a Fond du Lac clinic, and that was the first couple of years when I moved here. And what I found in that was that we have a great deal of disparities in our community here in Duluth with our American Indian population and our minority population in regards to health disparities, economic disparities, housing disparities, education, and I couldn't quite figure out why, because I think we're fairly well situated here with inclusiveness, and we've had many years of being of having an opportunity to be inclusive. And when I learned that our graduation rates in the state of Minnesota were about 50% for American Indian students, I became, shocked, and I couldn't figure out why this is happening and why it's being allowed to happen. And we did originally have our son in the ISD 709 school district system, but after kindergarten, we realized it really wasn't the right place for him, and he needed something that was a little bit more, individualized and quite frankly, smaller. And so we did put him into a smaller school, and that's working better for him. So what I realized at that time is that not everybody has that opportunity. And again, I'm coming from a place where I spent 21 years defending our Constitution and our American way of life. And when I realized that people weren't able to make decisions freely, either with their school system or their housing choices, that really tore me apart, because I thought, what happened? This is the reason that I wanted to defend this country, was so that we could have all these same liberties and freedoms. And when I didn't see that happening throughout the spectrum, it occurred to me that maybe the next step I need to take is to bolster my education and maybe figure out if there's some policy ways that we can, tackle some of these issues. So I did enroll in a Master's of Jurisprudence degree. It was an online program through the Loyola University of Chicago School of Law, and it's a master's degree, so I'm not a lawyer, but I am educated in jurisprudence for children's law and policy. And one of the aspects for that is to figure out how our children are impacted by the laws and policies that states make. And so that was an eye-opener for me, because one of the things that I was required to do was interview somebody who was specifically involved with their child's policy and law. And so I found the Guardian Ad Litem program here in the 6th Judicial District and interviewed the Guardian Ad Litem program manager, and really learned a lot about our child protection services. And as a result of that, I first started out as a volunteer for them, and now I'm employed as a guardian ad litem for the 6th Judicial District. And what that is it's an advocate for our children's best interests based on statutory requirements. And we're allowed to go into our foster care homes and meet with the children, meet with them at the school, meet with them in their family settings, and advocate for them in court for their best interests, or inform to the court. We're really supposed to be not quite investigators, but evaluators as to what are the best interests of the children. And what I see is a system that isn't necessarily working in the best interests of the children. And as we know, we've had conversations here in St. Louis County about hiring on more case managers, and also looking at where we're, failing in the system to protect our families. And so as a result of that, I've gained a lot of understanding as to what can be done, what should be done as far as our child protection. And one of the things I do like to point to is the Casey Family Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that has as their mission to reduce the need for foster care and foster care families. And also, when I was doing my master's degree work, it was based in Chicago, although it was an online program, but we used a lot of Chicago's examples for us. And one of the things they do quite well there in Cook County in particular is they partner and have collaborations with nonprofit organizations. So even though the Child Protection Service is required to do the in-home investigation and do the removals, they also partner with organizations who are better suited or more focused on meeting specific needs of a family. And so I liked that part of it. I liked that there was more collaboration.
So then in certain situations, these children will be able to stay with their families, but they need perhaps some assistance in dealing with children that they're not, maybe they haven't had good examples in their own families, but they want to keep their children, but they need help in being parenting. Is that kind of where that program is?
Yes.
Basically goes. So.
Yes, that's a really good way to put it, exactly. So the services would be focused on staying in the home. So removing whatever the dangers are, the barriers are for keeping those kids in the home, as opposed to taking the kids out of the home, putting them in foster care, trying to make them rework a plan. So it is more specific to home-based services, and they're specifically suited to, so if somebody had a special need with their like housing, it would be specific to that organization. But, like I said, there were more collaborations and more opportunities for the community to become involved. And I think maybe that's a piece that we're missing out on, is how do we have our community get involved. And it is concerning to me that we have our Native American Indian children, Native American Indian children removed from their homes. I believe it's 12 times, we're 12 times more likely to be removed than non-Native children, Caucasian children.
Oh, really?
Yes, and the African American community is high as well. The Asian community is high as well. So we have disparities within our removal system, and that's even with our federal law and state law. We have an Indian Child Welfare Act federal law, the ICWA it's referred to, and then the Minnesota Indian Family Preservation Act, the MIFPA, which is a state law. And both of those together are really intended to ensure that the Native American family stays together, that we have our families that aren't torn apart, that the children are to remain in place, and there's laws and provisions that are meant to be followed so that the removal agency isn't removing our kids at these high disproportionate rates. And the Congress specifically passed the ICWA in 1978 because of the volume of Indian families that were being torn apart. And so what I've witnessed here in the 6th Judicial District is somewhat of a misunderstanding, is probably how I'd prefer to characterize it, than a blatant disregard for the law. But there is a lot of opportunities for us to get better at taking our ICWA into compliance and taking our MIFPA into compliance. So those are two areas that I think we can do better at, and keeping our Indian families together, certainly. Yeah.
Well, Donna, that's quite a comprehensive background that you have. And I think you said it well, that people could certainly understand that you can play a very important role with all of the background you have, and for your run right now for a Senate seat in the state of Minnesota, where you could take some of that experience that you have and use it in perhaps laws that need to be updated and more workable, and other areas. Now, I see that you have with you, just so everybody knows that she's not in the Marine Corps anymore, she has a certificate of her retirement. Is that what you call it?
This is what I call it, yeah.
The discharge.
Yeah, it's my certificate of retirement, just so that everybody knows that I am retired from the Marine Corps, And
Quite an honor.
it is quite an honor. It is, yes. And I was a proud Marine, and this is another aspect to my background, is that I can speak to our veterans. I can certainly come to the table knowing many of the issues that affect our veterans already. And we have Marines that are, service members that are returning to our home communities, here, Duluth being one of them, who aren't able to access services in a way that I think they should be able to. You know, we made a commitment to them when they made their commitment to us to serve, that we would serve them when they returned home. And so I would like us to honor that, and specifically know that veterans have unique needs in their housing and their employment, you know, and even using the GI Bill, which is what I used when I went back for my master's. How do you pull all that together? And one of the things that I would like to point out also is that I just went to the 23rd Veterans Dinner on Saturday night, and what that speaks to is we have 22 veterans a day that commit suicide.
Oh my goodness.
In the state, throughout the United States, yes. And we all agree that that's a number that's far too high. And you know, why do we do that? Why do they do that? Well, I can speak to that as well, because in the military, it's quite a different environment. It's a different framework than what we have in our civilian community. You know, everybody in the military pretty much knows what the other guy next to you, the other gal next to you is going to do. We trust them, we rely on them, we expect them to follow the rules, we expect them to do their mission to the best of their ability. And when you return to the civilian world, it's quite different. And that's the beauty of America. You know, you get to, you know, it's a free-for-all, so to speak, and you get to do whatever you see is in the best interest of yourself and your pursuit of liberties and all those things. So when you come into the back into the civilian world, you transition here, you really have to regain the trust with the people that you work with, your community members, and it's oftentimes very difficult to do. So our veteran community is one that I would like to reach out to as well. And you know, I've said this in other forums where I say welcome home and thank you for serving, and we want to make Minnesota a place that is welcoming to you. I know Minnesota has made attempts at welcoming back our veterans. We have a Hire a Veteran initiative at the state level, and I'm not quite sure how well that's working. In my case, I will say that, you know, this is my personal perspective, is that I don't believe I was hired on a, you know, hire a veteran mantra. But I would like to see that others are able to do that and receive the services that they need. When we have get-togethers and forums and when policy is being made, you know, we can talk to many different levels, but we always need to remember our veterans. And you know, I know one of the things that is really significant here in our community is the use of the emergency rooms for our mental health situations, and how that might not be the best and most appropriate place for them to receive their services, and how many of them are veterans, how many of them are suffering from PTSD. We need to talk about that as well. And where is the best place to receive our mental health services in these crisis situations? So I would be very much you know, interested in talking about that subject as well.
Well, okay, Donna.
Yes.
I'm not sure I know where to start, but I will ask you this.
Thank you.
Did you get it? Okay, if you had 3 topics to choose from that would be key should you be elected in November, what 3 would you choose as something that needs to be done right away?
Well, those are, you know, that's a good question, and those are certainly good things to think about. You know, I think what I'd like to say first off is that I'm really running for the voter. I'm running for you. I'm running for our district. I want to bring our voice, inclusive of our values and priorities, down to the state capitol. So that is my number one priority, is to make sure that our voice is heard and inclusive of our different opinions. And when I do say that I value others' opinions and perspectives. I honestly mean that, and I would welcome other people to be able to come in and talk with me about what they believe, is their pressing issue. And where government touches people is where it's important to that person. And so, so for me, I would like to be able to say that I'm really inclusive of all different voices and all different people, and I'm going to represent everybody, whether you voted for me or not. And I would welcome that divergent opinion because, again, I think a lot of us have many, really good ideas, but I think together we have stronger and better ideas. So that would be the first thing I'd like to say is my first priority in that, I'm running for you, and I'm a bridge builder. I like to bring people in inclusively, and I certainly needed to do that in the Marine Corps. You don't get to pick and hire who you want. You get assigned folks to you. So I did enjoy being able to create teams out of very divergent people. So the second thing I believe is that our communities are now suffering because of the divisiveness in our politics. And I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's helpful to point fingers and to say, well, the other side did this or this side didn't do that. I think we really need to stick to the issues and the topics, and we certainly have our own suasions. Obviously, I'm the endorsed Republican candidate, and I align with the Republican side because of my beliefs in conservative and fiscal responsibility and limited involvement of the government. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate some of the priorities and values that the DFL has, that the Independent Party has, et cetera, et cetera. So that is my philosophy, and one that I would hope that people would understand. Yes, that is the party that I'm affiliated with, but I'm also very inclusive of our other opinions as well. So that is number two. Number three, I would have to say, is giving that pushback to the government, both the federal and the state, in their involvement in our lives. And I think when we accept too much of the federal mandates on our state, that we're really not adhering to the 10th Amendment, which is the states' rights to exercise their own powers that weren't given to the federal government. So I'm very much interested in pushing back on the federal government and saying, no, that's not going to work for our state, and that our states' rights are going to trump that. And I would really hope that because of that, it's going to affect how we handle our housing, how we handle our education, how we handle our economic ways here in the state. They're going to be more reflective of us as Minnesotans as opposed to just a federal mandate forced down upon us. So yes, that's what I would say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. When you get elected to an office, and since I'm elected, I have to apply this in my own realm, is you might be elected by a section of the district, but you represent every single person on your vote. That affects everyone. That's like throwing a rock into clear water that's, smooth. You throw that rock in and you see those ripple effects, and they touch, and they go out, and they keep going out. And so you talked about divisiveness. Well, there certainly is gridlock, because I want my way, and we're not going to come together on this. How do you see yourself working through that so that you can pull these people to the center and pass something that is going to be beneficial to everyone, and not that every law doesn't harm somebody over here or doesn't harm somebody over there, but for the majority, the best interest? How do you see, what would you do to make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Right, and that goes right back to that word compromise. And I think so often in our politics now we think that's a dirty word. But really when you look back at our founding fathers, that's exactly what they did. They didn't form this country out of revolt or out of an overthrow. They formed this country by debating, by talking, by listening to one another, and really listening to one another, not just, pretending to listen to each other, really listening to each other and saying, what is your journey, what is your story, how is it that you got here, and why are these your beliefs? And I think every one of us has our own story and our own journey, and I certainly know that it's going to take a lot of time to honor all those stories, but I'd be happy to do that and really talk to other people in a way that is respectful of their values and opinions, because they come as an elected representative for their districts. And of course we have to compromise. I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this gridlock. And so many times I feel that in this case, minority party, because the Republicans in this area aren't, the majority of population of the party, but we don't have our voices heard because it's somehow thought of as something that's it gets in the way, or it's going to impede progress, or it's not a perspective that they want to hear. So when I hear that, it makes me think back to, wow, what happened to America? What happened to this America that was founded on people's ability to compromise and ways to hammer out really creative solutions. And we can do that in different ways. And I think back to many different areas where we've had to do that. Our space efforts have had to work on compromise, and our school systems have had to work on compromise. And so I think our government system also needs to figure out how to work on that compromise, and to really bring people to the table and listen to them is something that I very much value, and I would consider that something that I'd be honored to do for the district, as their representative.
We talked briefly in the past, and I don't know if I told you I'm a small business person. And the continual increase of taxes from the school district, from the state. County hasn't increased the taxes so terribly, but they seem to stay within a reasonable budget with minor increases. But state and school district taxes, they're bludgeoning small business people like myself. It's incredible what they expect out of businesses. And so I believe from what I have investigated and looked into is there has to be some relief from the state level. I don't know how we can get it from the school district. Having monitored them for 8 years, there's incredible waste of spending, and of course you talked about taking your child out of the Duluth school system because he needed to be individualized, because he is an individual. Mm-hmm. And too often these big classroom sizes make it impossible for a kid that really needs to move forward, mm-hmm. because he's got more talent and more ability than some of the other kids. He's just kind of dragged into this quagmire and keeps him stagnant, mm-hmm. where I'm getting a little off the track here, but I see such wasteful spending in the public educational system, and quite frankly, I'm seeing a lot of that in the state as well. So we were supposed to get some relief, but that hasn't gone to special session yet, and it's being held up by this. I'm not going to give, and this side's not going to give, and so here we are as small business owners, hoping that little bit of tax relief would have helped us, and so far it hasn't. So when you get elected to office, what do you see as a way to help small businesses continue to be the backbone of America? I mean, small businesses mm-hmm. built America. Yes, now we're into big conglomerate corporations, but the small business owner, that's his focus. But mm-hmm. What voice have we got down in the state of Minnesota when they're just busy playing their games down there, and we're caught in the middle, and we keep paying these high taxes for what? Where's our money really going? I don't see a lot of road improvements, or some here and there, but I mean, where is our money really going down there, and why can't we get some relief?
Yes, right, exactly. And, I've been outdoor knocking, of course, and I am also door knocking businesses. And what I do hear from businesses is that same, statement. How do I survive as a small business when I have all these taxes that I have to pay and other requirements levied upon me? And I do believe that our small businesses are really the economic engine here for our communities. And I really believe in what I call micropreneurs, and that is the mom and pop or the startup shop. And it's a good way for some of our families to still have opportunities at home, but also have an income by working out of their home, have those flex hours if they need them. So I am concerned about that as well, and I would like to see what we can do to actually lessen the burden on our small businesses and help them to be more successful in what they do, so that we don't have as many closing down and having to close down because either their property taxes went up or their requirements for their employees went up, and they just couldn't make it. So the focus needs to stay on what that business is and what that business is providing to the community, and how do we help that business thrive as a state is a really good question. And I don't have quite frankly an answer right off the top of my head, because I would like to engage the small business community in knowing more about what we need to do to help them. But certainly giving them tax relief is something that I have heard over and over is some way that we could help them stay successful as a small business. And I will say that I was a small business owner when I was out in Maryland as well. I owned a research company, and it was very small. I primarily ran it myself and hired a handful of people here and there to help out. And I did look into becoming, being part of that 8A process and growing the business. And then as it turned out, I realized I didn't want to grow the business. I really just wanted to keep it small and keep it working for me that I wanted to have it at. But there was a lot of pressure from the state that I was living in at the time, and then also the federal government, to really grow these businesses. And I felt that if there was a way that they could recognize me as wanting to just stay at this level, that would have been great. So as we look at our small businesses, I want to say, how can we help you be successful? Because I think small businesses are important to our communities.
And some of us don't mind getting a little bit bigger, but I don't want to grow enormously that I cannot know who my customers are and keep abreast of the improvements that need to be made in increments. Being a business owner, there's a lot of responsibility. Well, if you get so big that you're thrust with more responsibility, it can become overwhelming, and I think a lot of times people go under just simply for that. So I don't want to be big, but I don't want to be constantly overtaxed to the point where I can't make improvements. I mean, if I have to go get a loan, and this has happened over the 10 years, almost 10 years now we've had it, to go get a loan to pay your taxes, that's to me a bit insane. I mean, why do you have to pay interest on money to pay your taxes? I know there are other businesses that are experiencing that same thing. And fortunately, because we are responsible in paying the loan that we have on the business, the institution that we have our business through gives us a small credit loan, which we can use for what we need. And of course, we have to pay it back with interest. Now, I am still scratching my head trying to figure out if this really makes sense. When I'm being overtaxed, and like I said, what am I being overtaxed for? Where is my money really going?
Right. Well, I think we can do a lot better in having a business-friendly environment here in the state of Minnesota, and also, making sure that our businesses are welcome here, letting them know that, and giving a tax relief not only to our small businesses but to our seniors. I know that was presented to the legislative session last time to relieve burdens on the senior citizens for their retirement pay, and our veterans. Our veterans' retirement pay is taxed. And so, there's just, in my opinion, overtaxing. Now, I wouldn't benefit from that because I wouldn't receive retirement pay until I'm 62. But I certainly think that we have veterans, we have seniors, and we have small businesses that leave the state of Minnesota because of our high taxes. So we need to talk about that and how we're going to come up with a plan so that we don't have so many small businesses leaving the state.
Well, I'm glad you brought the fact up that seniors and, of course, veterans are being taxed. We have a small amount of Social Security, and it's because I raised my children. They didn't go to daycare centers, and so I didn't work when my children were growing up. I home educated them, and I stayed at home. So I have a very small amount of money for Social Security, and so, you know, it comes from my husband. Well, we're taxed on it. We had to pay taxes because we made just a little too much on our business. We then paid on our Social Security, and I shake my head and I go, I earned that money once, and now I'm paying taxes on it 2 times?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
And,
some things just don't make sense to me.
Yes, yeah, I do believe that also, is that other people have said to me, that's a tax that I've already paid, why am I taxed on that tax? And I say, well, we'll see what we can do and try to get that relief for you, because I know even just a little bit can help a lot. And I have, you know, elderly parents. I have my dad who's able to live at home and lives primarily off his Social Security and some of his retirement pay. And my mom's in an assisted living facility, and she gets a very small amount also because she stayed at home raising us kids and then worked for a little bit after that. But, you know, to have that relief for them would mean so much, and would mean that they would be able to stay here and live maybe a little bit better in their older years than if it were, you know, fully taxed on them. So I think that's a burden that we should really consider taking off of our seniors.
Something else you had briefly mentioned, Donna, was we talked briefly about education, and I have to bring this to your attention. The other night I got a phone call, and it was a survey about who would I vote for today if the election was held, and then who am I going to vote for in November? Well, I don't really like to answer those questions because, quite frankly, I don't think it's really anybody else's business but my own. But I was so sickened by the young lady on the other end of the line that couldn't even pronounce, and I'll use a candidate's name, she couldn't say Stuart Mills. She slurred through his first name and said Mills. And the same with Nancy Pelosi. She could not pronounce Pelosi. And she slurred through a few other words of this script that I'm sure was in front of her. And I know from monitoring the 709 school district, I know about the problem, the disparity between the Native Americans and the people of color. I also know that at my old alma mater, Denfeld, the graduation rate out there of all students is lower than it is in the other end of the city, which just grieves me. When I went to school, we were the war babies, and there was 1,500 kids in a building that is half the size it is right now. And we all had textbooks, we all sat in desks, we all had really good teachers, some of which we didn't like, but now I appreciate them. They made us do the work. But I know the kids are coming from broken families, and you know that whole mix of what's going on in the educational system, and I really have to hand it to those teachers that are doing an excellent job. But we've got to do something about children that are coming out of school. They've been passed from grade to grade. They got a diploma, but if they cannot read and write, and I've talked to business owners that when they come and they apply for a job, they can't spell. And some of them can't read, and some of these jobs are low entry, but a lot of them are not. What are we going to do to fix the educational system? It seems to me the federal government needs to stop interfering, and we need to get it back in the state's hands and really work in the individual districts. That is too big for you to say what a solution is, but I'm just bringing it to your attention because it's what I've seen for the last 8 years, and it's really grievous to me.
Yes, it is, and I have to agree with you. And why more people aren't speaking out about it is really grieving to me as well. To really make this a centerpiece of my platform is something that just breaks my heart, because we should all be standing up and saying this isn't acceptable. Because once our kids don't graduate from high school, you know, they don't have an opportunity to go to college. They don't have an opportunity for better education. opportunities outside of college, and they don't have economic opportunities. They spiral down into poverty, and then the health disparities and the housing, and it just, it just repeats that cycle. So we need to somehow figure it out. And I have heard that, with us being in this place, maybe we need to entertain the idea of summer school. Maybe we need to think about bringing some of that back. I did hear that conversation not too long ago, and I also heard people saying, even at the state level, that we need to give better education credits, better tax credits, maybe even vouchers for those children that are in extreme crisis, to be able to choose, let their parents choose the school system that's going to work best for their kids. Because right now this is a crisis, and I think this is a crisis for our state, along with our community here in Duluth, that we need to take immediate action, whatever that means. And it doesn't mean that it has to be something that lasts forever. Maybe this is a 4-year plan that we step up to, and we, take 4 years to try to get our kids, graduated in the best way we can, while we're working on another part of the plan that's going to address in 4 years how, that'll be handled, and then in 8 years. But I certainly think we need to hold our leaders accountable. And if there are measures that our leaders have that they're not meeting, then we need to talk about that. And those are uncomfortable conversations. And what I strive to do is be comfortable in uncomfortable conversations. And, it means being able to listen to other people, even though they're saying things that you don't want to hear. I mean, nobody really likes to hear that, they didn't score 10.0 on that vault. But sometimes we have to say those things, because the people that are being, disadvantaged are children who really don't have a voice many times at the table. So we need to bring our children's voice to the table. We need to, really talk to all the different stakeholders, including the teachers union. What can you do to push back? Maybe write some different criteria within your contracts that say you're not going to have more than 18 kids in K through 3, because we know how important it is for our kids that are learning to read before they read to learn, and cap those classrooms and try to figure out ways that we can bring more diversity, more teachers of color into our classrooms. So I think there's a number of opportunities. We have so many wonderful ideas and opportunities, and I think what we're lacking is just this bold person, if I can say that. We're lacking a bold visionary to say, yes, we're going to do that. And I would like to ask people to be bold, to stand up and say, yep, I'm going to stand up for this, and I'm going to advocate for a better way for our kids.
Well, I think that's a good start, for sure. While you were, a couple other things came to mind while you were talking there is, okay, every now and then I take community education classes, and I love to get into some more genealogy of my family. I just don't seem to be able to squeeze that in with everything else I'm doing. But I was being taught by a woman who was a former educator up at St. Scholastica. And we were standing in a room at one of the eastern schools. And I just started asking questions, which I love to ask people questions, especially if they've been in education. And she said, well, we're standing in a remedial classroom right now. And I said, oh, really? So I looked around and I counted the desks. There were about 35 desks in this remedial classroom. Now, she had previously stated that if she were a teacher in the Duluth public school system, she would have 15 to 18 kids and no more. And you mentioned, you used that 18 as a figure. That's why I brought it to mind. So, and then it was like, okay, now what do I say when she just gets done saying we're standing in a remedial classroom and I count the desks and there's 35 desks in there. I mean, it's just like, wait a minute here. How are 35 kids in a remedial class going to get the attention they need? So I have to agree, we need smaller class sizes. There's no doubt in my mind that that would work. And although when I went to school, we didn't have 18 kids. We had more than that. But that was an age when if your teacher said you were doing something wrong, you went home and you probably got punished in school, but then you went home and you got it again because your parents made you. Parents were there to say, you can't get away with this. And I know that the teachers don't have that kind of backup system today. So it's almost like we've got ourselves into a problem that is like, how do we fix this? And certainly I believe that one of the things is we can't have teachers that can get a tenure in 3 years and then stay at the job because they're a union worker who they can't get rid of. There is definitely a problem there. I'm just going to bring that to your attention from what I've seen. We're keeping teachers who are not qualified like they were when I went to school and don't make you get the job done. But then there's all of these regulations that force these teachers to do this, and this. And so it's like a quagmire. And I see a lot of that coming from federal government. And so I would ask you, once you're elected, to really consider that as a major part of the problem. We've just got too much interference at the federal level, where I believe it should go back to the states where it was. I know when I went to school it was within the states, and then the local district had control to deal with the problems within that community, because every community in Minnesota and throughout the whole United States is different than this one over here. Right. And the problems over here have no consequence over here. But yet when you put everybody into this big quagmire and you make one shoe that's supposed to fit every single district, it doesn't work. That is a major problem. I see that as a major problem. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that there is somewhat of this cookie cutter mentality where the square peg fits in the round hole, which really isn't reflective anymore of our learning styles and the children that we're bringing up. So, what I would like to do is have those community conversations. How can we better instruct our kids? We do a lot of really good research on our educational system. And I do have and have had several conversations with leaders in our educational community. And what we know is that we know how to do it well. And different countries, and I know Finland is one of them, oftentimes uses our research to better their school system.
Really?
We don't do that. And what's the hesitation? Why can't we get there? Is what I would like to find out. So again, I think we will have stakeholders who are going to be afraid to make those changes, but I think we need to make those changes. And, many years ago I read that book, Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know if you remember that, but it was this tiny little book. And anyway, it is kind of a summary of how do you deal with change. Something's changed, and how do you deal with that change? How are you going to move on, or you're not going to move on? Are you going to stay in that same, cubicle waiting for that cheese to come to you, which isn't coming anymore? So we need to move on. We need to learn how to move into the 21st century and really accept our 21st century learners and move in that direction. And so I think definitely our schools are one of the top priorities for me, and learning how we can make a better place for everybody. So the teachers, for the administration, for the students, for the families. And we have many families in the Duluth community that I know of who are very still, suspect of the school system because of the boarding school, mentality that they bring to the table, which was part of their historical narrative. And so our schools, need to be education friendly for our families. And I think that's a big piece that's missing. And so when we do start talking about different aspects of it and why kids don't go to school, I've heard a lot of different reasons. And one reason that does stand out is that the families don't feel welcome there. Yeah. And I even had a student who dropped out of school, now is an adult, and I said to them, can I just ask, why did you drop out of school? I just want to ask you in a good way. And he said, well, it was really the bullying and, just kind of the teasing and the shaming. And I said, well, weren't you able to tell your teacher or, bring it to somebody's attention? He said, that was my teacher. And that
my goodness.
That broke my heart. And I know that there's many, many good teachers in our school district, and absolutely, give my hats off to our school teachers who are in very difficult situations, time and time again, and that have really good hearts. But also we have a side of the story that's there, that's not being told. And, so again, who's bringing those voices to the table, and how can we not be afraid to say those things? How can we have teachers who are in the school district who see these things and know these things come to the table and be able to tell these things without fear of retribution, without fear of losing their jobs? So again, this is America. We need to know that you can exercise your freedom of speech, and you shouldn't have any retributions for your, willingness to pursue your own liberty interests. So I see we're winding down.
It's amazing. We've gone through an hour already, and we have about 5 minutes left. I just wanted to, there again, you brought up some interesting points. The bullying situation has gotten so terrible that, some children have committed suicide over that. That's so grievous. That is so grievous. It doesn't matter who the child is. It's a life that didn't feel worth living because of the bullying. And that, to me, should be shock treatment for the whole community to get behind and say, why does this bullying continue? Well, I think we see that. I think we see that in television. We see it in the political leadership. We see it even from administration down in every aspect. So our children are emanating what they're seeing on a higher level. And I think it's imperative for people to stop and think what they're doing and what the young people are seeing. And so I appreciate the fact that you come here and given us such a phenomenal view of who you are and what you'd like to see happen when you're elected in November. And so what are some thoughts that you would just like to wrap up your time here with us?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here, and it's nice to be able to engage the community in any way that I can. Of course, I have a Facebook page, I have a website, and I have email, phone. So if anybody is interested in reaching out to me, I'm sure if you just Google Donna Bergstrom, you'd find it. But I encourage you to connect with me. I'd really appreciate that. Second takeaway I would say is that just to remind people that you can cross-ballot vote or split ballot vote, however you want to call it, in that when you go to the ballot box in November, you can vote for one party on the top, go to another party on the second, go to another party on the third. So if you are so inclined as to vote for one party, and that's your inclination on the national level, know that you can cross-ballot vote at different levels throughout. So some people say, it really is surprising to me that you're a Republican, and I don't know that I've ever voted for a Republican, or I voted for a Republican, and but it was years back, and so I would just really ask people to look critically at their names and their positions on the ballot, and if I'd be so honored to have each and everyone's vote. Even though I am, first-time candidate, but I bring a broad and diverse background and hope that I'd be able to serve our community well with that background.
Would you like to give your Facebook page for people?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook at Bergstrom for Senate, and then my website is donnabergstrom4, FORMN.org, and then my email address is bergstrom4mn@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you so much, Donna, for being here today. I appreciated hearing more about you, and wish you luck. November date. What is the date that we go to the polls for the general election now? And this includes the presidential election, the state offices, county, and judges,
Congress,
and the Congress.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's November 8th.
November 8th. Okay.
Right.
Thank you
So
again.
Thank you.